Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the second edition of the Prairie Pinfall podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, joined by my friend Chris here. We're your cross promotion Canadians, and once again, we're going to be looking at everything professional wrestling. So, honestly, I watched a lot this week, Chris. I don't know about you. I watched everything WWE, everything AEW, and a little bit more. I like the Live to Return, a little bit cringy promos, but I like the direction everything's headed in. Like, even with the Jey Uso, him crashing out, because if he isn't the one crashing out, it would have been the fans crashing out if he won that match. AEW Continental Classic, looking smooth, looking good. I really enjoyed the matches. What did you think this week?
Yeah, it was a good week of wrestling. I thought, I certainly didn't get to watch as much as you have. I've been swamped with work. And it's a lot of wrestling to try and watch. You know what I mean? But I've caught the highlights and I've been paying attention with everything for sure. You guys know I'm a bigger AEW fan than WWE fan, but I do try to watch everything. And Raw was an outstanding episode, I thought, this week. And especially after last week when we talked about Survivor Series War Games and how weak of a show it kind of was, Raw was such a good episode. I thought everything was great. The tag titles feud right at the end of the show, where everybody's coming in after for the titles, that just elevates the titles in my eyes. It makes them seem so special, and that being in the main event as well, it's just huge for the women's division and kind of highlights how they've been the MVP for the company this year. Jey Uso crashing out. I agree with you, Tyler. I would have crashed out if he won that match. Good Lord, I am sick of Jey Uso, but I'm sick of him as a character, but if he continues down this path that they're kind of building with him as the mini Roman or whatever, or he's fallen to the dark side of the bloodline or whatever you want to say, that's very interesting. And I'm curious to see how they take that character because it could be very fun. Liv Morgan as well, like you mentioned, the promo a little cringy for sure, but I do like the direction of instead of coming back and being super jealous of Roxanne and Raquel and all that,
Yeah.
they seem all united and the Judgment Day seems stronger than ever. It's a different direction than what they're building on, and I think it's going to lead to some fun dynamics because I think Roxanne's a very interesting character and a very fun character, and Liv as well is going to play off of her really well, and it's just going to be very fun to watch, and it will lead to when the eventual breakup comes down the line to be hit a lot harder as well if we can see kind of a friendship develop and then them come apart. I have not been able to watch NXT this week, unfortunately. It's just, again, timing and everything. But Wednesday I watched AEW Dynamite, and the Continental Classic is in full force. Having a ton of fun with that. Pac and Okada, I believe, Pac and Okada. I mean, these guys, so Pac was Okada's first pay-per-view match in AEW, and they had a banger then, and they just ran it back in on Dynamite. These are two of the best in-ring workers in the world here, and two different styles for sure, but Pac was just so much. Pac just meshes so well with Okada and what he wants to do. And then the main event as well, and a guy we're going to talk about a little bit more, Jon Moxley and his story with the Death Riders right now, really the highlight of AEW right now. And those are the two main shows that I really watched this week. I tuned into SmackDown the same way I tune in every week to watch Ilya Dragunov's U.S. title match, and then didn't watch anything else. And that's really where I want to start this week, because that man has been a bright spot on SmackDown for so long, and the U.S. title in general. And, what were your thoughts on that match, Tyler? Because that was one of my favorite matches this week. Him and Mello never miss.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think every single week he just gets more and more entertaining for me because of his intensity and because of his character work, and just he's very strong in-ring performer, but he's a very strong out of the ring performer as well. However, one thing that may differ a little bit between you and me, I really liked Carmelo Hayes in that match. I think he really shows that he's got the speed, he's got the charisma, he's got everything that a WWE wrestler needs in this current day and age. I do think that he is headed towards the next generation Dolph Ziggler type role, where he's a complete package, but just probably going to be misused.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, actually. And I love Mello as well. And, this is the part of the reason I like this match is it's a continuation of one of my favorite feuds from NXT a few years ago, where Dragunov and Mello feuded over the NXT title and had 3 matches back to back on pay-per-views that were just incredible, right? And, that kind of reignited my love for wrestling in a lot of ways. I'd kind of been a disillusioned fan at that point for a long time, and their feud, for one thing, made me a fan of both of the guys, but especially of Ilya. But I do agree, and I think part of it really is just the size. Mello is a complete package in a lot of ways, but he's small, and he doesn't wrestle with enough intensity. Ilya is not necessarily a big guy either, though he is definitely bulked up quite a bit. But Ilya, to me, falls more into that Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson role, where he's a little guy that wrestles with so much intensity that he's actually believable beating the bigger guys. Melo doesn't do that, and I think, unfortunately, it's going to put him in a role where he's used to get more guys with a better look over, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know what your thoughts are, but that's the Dolph Ziggler role, I think. He's going to have a couple highs through his career, like, Dolph Ziggler's world title runs and, his Survivor Series match with the Authority, one of my favorite moments in wrestling history. But ultimately, I think Melo is going to be stuck firmly in the mid card, which is unfortunate because he is probably good enough to be a main event guy.
Yeah, and I think he kind of fits into that Ricochet role, right? Where maybe it is a move to AEW that makes him realize his full potential. But as of right now, I think he's quite promising. It's just a matter of will they overlook his size. I think he's a good
Yeah.
seller. His in-ring work is good. I think he needs a little bit more practice on the mic, and that's why they paired him up with The Miz when they first called him up to the main roster.
Yeah.
But I think it's only a matter of time for him. I will say, when it comes to that specific United States Championship match, that Ciampa spot at the end ruined it for me. I did not like how that match finished.
And this is a bigger problem with WWE in general, is just that they overuse the interference finish a lot, and there's not a lot of clean finishes. I will say I don't necessarily agree with you on that it was bad for this match. I actually think it helps further the story they're telling with Ciampa being really frustrated that he's not getting his opportunity against Ilya, and it's going to lead to eventually what is going to be an incredible match between Ilya and Ciampa. It's just unfortunate that it comes at the end of what was a great match, and it kind of ruins a match. And it's also really unfortunate because this is something WWE just overuses, is that, nobody can lose clean. And so I think if we're living in a world where WWE is booking a little more like AEW, where guys are just allowed to lose clean, it doesn't stand out as much. But the problem is WWE does it so much that it just kind of becomes tiresome. I don't know
Yeah.
if you agree with that.
No, I agree with that 100% because, matter of fact, this week I actually watched WWE and then I immediately went and watched Dynamite. And just that paradox between the two, as you mentioned, their inability to book a clean win over another wrestler, or at least WWE's inability to do that, is very evident.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really stands out too, and especially with the Continental Classic going on right now in AEW, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of the biggest examples, and this is actually a trend going back to last year. One of my personal favorites in the business, a living legend in Kazuchika Okada, a guy who, like, as far as like, might be the New Japan GOAT, if when things are all said and done, came over to AEW and has been booked like a world beater for the most part. But then a young up and comer, Kyle Fletcher, gets a clean win over him last year in the Continental Classic, gets a clean win over him this year in the Continental Classic. They're stablemates as well, which adds a whole other layer to the story they're kind of telling there. But it helps put Fletcher over, and it really hasn't hurt Okada all that much because it's a tournament, and then, anything can happen. That's something else I really want to talk about, and I kind of touched on it there. Just this whole story with Takeshita and Okada and Fletcher. Fletcher kind of being the third guy in the stable that's getting caught in the middle of their feud. We'll talk about Jon Moxley a little later and how great his feud has been, but this has been the feud that I look forward to the most every week. Takeshita and Okada, they play off each other so well. There's a good level of, comedy in the feud, but also there's legit bad blood, and it's slowly building to the point to where when they finally come to blows in their match, it's like it's going to be electric, I think.
Yeah. And I think especially it kind of goes back to just that strategic booking, right? So, for example, Okada losing to Fletcher didn't hurt him because at the end of the day, he lost in a tournament. And what is Okada? The master of tournaments, especially if you look back at his time in New Japan, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that strategic booking. And I agree with you 100%. Fletcher is one of those guys that I looked at and I was like, oh, instantly fell in love with on AEW.
He just gets it. He just nails his role, nails the in-ring. He has stepped up in every way the last couple of years. He is a rising star.
Absolutely. This might just be me. I think he looks better with hair rather than like a full buzz cut. But that, as we've kind of said, that doesn't really hurt your chances in AEW, right? So I think, especially Okada's match, even this last week against Pac, I think that match was one of the best matches I've seen in a little while. But I found just like that evolution of Pac and the evolution of his moveset, his look, his character, his everything has really made a full 360, and it's been a very pleasant surprise. Even in that match, I felt like Pac kind of controlled the flow of it, just for Okada to kind of sneakily get that roll up win at the end.
Yeah.
But there's really been no bad matches in the Continental Classic.
Hmm. Yeah, I 100% agree. And like you can look at some of the other matches that happened. Kyle Fletcher and Kevin Knight also
Yeah.
happened, and that was just a barn burner too. And then you get to the main event, and we alluded to it earlier: John Moxley versus Claudio Castagnoli, and this was a big match. Everybody was really looking forward to this, not only because it was going to be a banger. Like even WWE fans know Cesaro is one of the all-time great in-ring workers, and one of the most underutilized guys WWE has had over the years. And in AEW, it's no different, right? And then John Moxley, who is arguably the ace of AEW. If you go back, right to AEW's inception, he's probably the most important person overall over the last several years of AEW's existence. We're getting into the home stretch now of this story with the Death Riders, where they're very clearly losing faith in John Moxley, and that match is the turning point. Claudio getting a clean win over Moxley
Yeah.
and really showing that, Moxley shouldn't be running the Death Riders anymore. And I'm very interested to see where it goes this week on Dynamite.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this week was the first week that every Death Riders member has lost since its inception. So that shows you the uncertainty of that faction now, too, right?
Yeah. A faction that was so dominant a year ago today, to the point where it was almost annoyingly dominant, right? Like the Death Rider story started off slow, but the way they've really picked it up into right from the build, really it picked up the point Adam Copeland started feuding with them. Like that was the point the feud picked up. And then it built right all the way through All In with Adam Page, eventually taking the title from John Moxley, and then into the Darby Allin stuff, and now into this point where they're very clearly building that there's going to be some changes to the Death Riders lineup.
Absolutely. And it's a little bit of a shame because they're all such skilled wrestlers.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, stories need innovation, and that's what's going to provide it, right? Now, it's funny you mentioned Darby Allin because he is injured now, legitimately. He's out with a head injury, so they have removed him from the Continental Classic. So that's going to kind of, talking about innovation, that's going to change up the Classic's storyline a little bit there. But we'll see what happens. So he has been replaced by Jungle Boy Jack Perry.
Getting replaced by Jungle Boy is, CM Punk's favorite guy from AEW, eh? But, and that's, bringing up Jungle Boy actually too, and this is something we didn't prep for or anything like that, but even his story lately, like this is something AEW's done so well lately, is just building the individual stories of these characters, because Jungle Boy was a guy that a year and a half ago was dead in the water, and even 6 months ago, you could argue was dead in the water. And then they built this short-term story with him turning on the Young Bucks and being sick of the Young Bucks, and their antics. The return of Luchasaurus and the return of Lucha Express, which is, hot take, might be one of my favorite entrances in wrestling right now. I love the vibes of their entrance. But like the whole story of it and the way those two have evolved over their time in AEW is just the long-term booking and everything has made two characters that I couldn't have cared less about a year ago into something that I look forward to seeing every week. AEW's done a really good job of doing that with a lot of different guys lately. I know I'm a big AEW fan, and it sounds like I just am glazing, if you want to use that term. They've been really good at getting a ton of guys over that I really didn't care about even a year ago,
I think just their use of finding that extra level in a lot of these guys is what really separates them from a lot of these other promotions. So a guy like Ricochet, who maybe wasn't the best mic worker in WWE, comes over to AEW, and not only does he improve, but now he can cut a very decent promo. We saw
Yeah.
that on Dynamite, and now he's a lot more fleshed out, a lot more complete character because of that.
They have a character that fits with him. Stone Cold used to always say this little quote. He had this little quote about being a character, and he always says your character has to be an extension of yourself, or like an exaggerated version of yourself. When you think about, Ricochet getting into Twitter beefs all the time and stuff like that, shockingly, being a little shithead on TV just works so well for him, right? He plays it so naturally. So, and this is something that WWE's just seemed to be scared to do with him. They didn't want to put a mic in his hand. They wanted him to be a face because he wrestles like a face, sure. But just from a pure character perspective, it makes so much more sense for him. You can afford to make Ricochet a heel as well and play to his strengths a little more.
Ultimately, in wrestling, you have to find what distinguishes one wrestler from another. Ricochet's found that by being that little disruptor. One person who's been both in AEW and WWE that I always think of that still hasn't really found that is Jade Cargill, for example, where you don't really know where she fits in. And because of that, she's kind of just the bland heel where she's has a physique, I guess.
Yeah, her biggest problem, I think, is she can't wrestle, to be perfectly honest. Like just to be completely blunt, she has an incredible look. She has a ton of aura, if you want to use the kids' term, when she comes out and everything, and that's why she's over. But you put a mic in her hand, and her character doesn't fit what she's trying to play. Like she should be trying to play more of a silent or even a bit of a cocky badass character, and like she doesn't really try to play that. Like she's just, I don't know, it doesn't work for her, the character. And to top it all off, she can't go in the ring. Like Tiffany Stratton's one of the better in-ring workers in WWE on the women's side right now, and they couldn't put together a good match. Like, that's saying something to me.
Yeah, and it's kind of like even Jey Uso now, where he has everything that WWE likes. He has that look. He's getting pushed. He's way over, but is missing some of those connecting steps, right? It's just trying to find that perfect middle and that more complete wrestler. I think
Yeah.
one person that they're trying to do that with, who we haven't seen in a while, is actually Natalya. Because Natalya is a great in-ring worker, but one thing that never really worked for her was her character. And they've kind of cut some promos with her and Maxine Dupree, where she's looking like a more serious character. And maybe that comes back and maybe she takes a run of the tag titles with Maxine, right?
Yep.
So it's just finding that misuse or use of these characters in the right spots, I guess.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and when you mentioned that you wanted to talk about this as well, with Natalya, it's funny, this character isn't actually a new thing for her. So she has been using this character for a little while now in GCW, which is a smaller
Yeah.
independent promotion, and specifically Bloodsport. So she's been using this character for a while there, and now they're finally bringing it up to the main roster. And to your point as well about, a tag title run with Maxine, I think that fits really well because it's kind of the straight man and, the comedy relief to an extent,
Yeah.
which makes for a very fun dynamic all the time. I'm very interested to see where they take this character because, Natalya should be viewed as a women's wrestling legend. The unfortunate reality is she came up during arguably the darkest era of North American women wrestling. And
Yeah.
so she never really got her due. She should be considered one of the GOATs right alongside an AJ Lee, right alongside a Beth Phoenix, but unfortunately she just didn't have the opportunity, right? And so maybe this is an opportunity for her to finally have that.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to even last week where we were talking about Nikki Bella and how she really wasn't loved because she was part of that era, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that I am a little bit concerned about is, does Natalya have that kind of Nikki Bella dynamic where no one's really clamoring for her to come back, but they'll be happy that she's back kind of deal?
I think ultimately you still have to get yourself over. And so
Yeah.
it's partially going to come down to WWE giving her the opportunity to do it, and then she has to take the ball and run with it and get over herself. One other thing I wanted to, and just to kind of take a step back, because you mentioned Jey Uso and kind of his character and stuff. One thing I am very interested in is how they're going to turn this into, a mini Roman Reigns type of character. And, we did mention it already, but it's very fun, and it's something they kind of stepped away from for a second, and I hope they just continue building towards it because there's so many directions you could take. You can give Jimmy and Jay a chance to maybe try and run back their horrible WrestleMania match from a few years ago and do something better, because one thing I will say, and one thing I not necessarily disagree with you on, but I don't think Jay's actually a bad in-ring wrestler. I think he's had a bad stretch this year. I don't think he's been great this year. But I mean, I think back to, the Usos as tag team wrestlers. They were one of the best tag teams ever, right? And they were legit good in the ring. Jay's early run as main event Jey Uso when he was still part of the bloodline, he was putting on some pretty good matches as a singles competitor. But I think he's simplified himself so much that he's kind of gotten away from what originally got him over and with that early main event Jay run. And so I hope going this way and becoming a bit more of a serious character and even showing a bit more nuance to the character work can also help unlock a different side of his in-ring work.
Hopefully he can reinvent himself once again. Not his character, but just his in-ring work. So then his character can be used correctly once again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That being said, I completely agree, though. I am so glad he did not go over LA Knight because of the two, and by no means do I think Knight is a world beater in the ring, but he's above average, I think. Like, he's very good. He's a better character. He's arguably, and, this may be a hot take, he might be the best promo in the company right now.
Yeah.
He could be. He's definitely the most entertaining on the mic, I would say. And that takes me into something else I kind of want to talk about, and that's Knight versus Gunther. I kind of lied earlier. I did watch Knight versus Gunther. I didn't just watch Ilya's match. I watched Knight versus Gunther as well. Gunther's another one of my favorites. And there was a lot of, hype for this match and stuff, and there was a lot of hope that LA Knight would be the one to win. And I can completely understand that. As an LA Knight fan, it would have been awesome to see him win and get that rub against Gunther. But I think ultimately WWE made the right decision, and I know I'm kind of on an island like that, actually, which is crazy to me. But I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. Do you think they went the right direction?
Even if you rewind it back to last week, we talked about the Last Time Is Now tournament, and I told you last week it's going to be Gunther versus Cena, and Gunther's going to retire him. And I still very much think that that's going to be the case. I'm not surprised at all. There was a little bit of me that was really hoping LA Knight was going to carry that victory, but you know what? I saw this coming. I do think where they're headed with Gunther and the Last Time Is Now tournament is him becoming the next legend killer. So maybe
Yeah.
they wait until a Randy Orton comes back, and then the new age legend killer kills the OG legend killer.
Yep. Absolutely. That's definitely an option. And I could definitely see them doing that. My thing is, and I think even if they don't go that route with the Legend Killer, I still think this is the right choice for a couple reasons. One, straight up, I think pound for pound, bar for bar, Gunther is the best performer in the company. He is the best in-ring worker, but as a character, I think Gunther is, he may be a slight step behind what a Cody Rhodes or a CM Punk is, but he's better than both of them in the ring. So I think just as a complete package, he's the best in the company right now. I just think Gunther is the best choice because I think retiring John Cena is something that should go to one, a bit of an up and comer. And, some argue that Gunther's already there. I don't think he is. I think he is still a step below Cody, Reigns, Punk, Seth. Like, he is a step below that high end level of the company. This is a way for him to finally step into that. And the booking after the fact has to kind of match that for sure. Like, I think he has to. And I agree with him going after a Randy Orton. I think he has to go after a Randy Orton and beat him and then win either the Royal Rumble or Elimination Chamber, and he needs to go after the WWE title and take it off of Cody. You need to cement him as the next big monster heel in the company. The other option, and one thing we didn't talk about, and one thing that I actually think is very realistic, is after he retires Cena, he doesn't go after Orton or Cody, he goes after a Brock Lesnar.
I was just going to say that.
Okay, yep. And that
The,
is something, like, if you want to keep Gunther away from the title for now, if he goes after Lesnar and beats Lesnar at Mania, then that firmly, after having retired Goldberg, retired Cena, and then beating Lesnar, that firmly puts him as the next major monster heel. Interestingly, though, I think he also works as a face. Like, I think he's at his best where you don't really know what his allegiance is.
100%. And like, kind of like a early Roman Reigns tribal chief, where you knew he wasn't like a full bad guy, but you knew he wasn't necessarily a full good guy either, right?
If I can tell you my dream booking, honestly, it's Gunther goes into the Rumble, Lesnar comes out after, Gunther eliminates Lesnar, Lesnar gets mad and takes Gunther out. It's lazy booking, but it's the easiest way to just make them hate each other, right? And then you can build this into a feud where they're like taking shots at each other. They have some big brawls. Think like Lesnar Undertaker a few years ago, like brawls like that. It ends with Gunther beating Lesnar at Mania. You don't have to retire Lesnar, but if you retired Lesnar and got him off my TV screen, I wouldn't complain about it necessarily.
I think he's one of those guys that has kind of run his course with especially some of the more controversial stuff recently. And
Yeah.
then, like, no one's not denying it. He was one of the best WWE performers in the early, late 2000s, without a doubt. But every wrestler, every person, every athlete has their time. I think now's a time for him to just take that step back and kind of live the rest of his life, right?
It's a bigger issue talking about, like, I kind of talked about it last week too, where I'm just so tired of the top of the WWE card being the same over and over again that I just want to see something new. If Lesnar doesn't want to retire, at the very least, he's not around often enough that it's actually that big of a problem. But Gunther beating him and supplanting him as like that monster heel in the company, that final boss, if you will, or the big bad, whatever you want to call him, I think that's just the right play personally, and putting Gunther in that spot is the right play. Anyways, to get back where I was going, like with my dream booking of the company is, Gunther beats Lesnar at Mania. turns that into a feud with Cody Rhodes where he takes the WWE title off of Rhodes and then, holds it for a while. And then, next year at WrestleMania, we get an Ilya versus Gunther match because that feud is just works perfectly on paper with their history. And it'll be the best match in WrestleMania history probably because they're just so good,
You were talking about like just the change up of that top end talent,
Yeah.
right? What do you think about the Cody versus Oba setup now for Saturday night's main event?
You know what I would love to see? I would love to see an upset win in the sense that Oba beats Cody. It will not happen. And arguably, it probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't have your top title holder losing to a developmental talent. But that would it would change the main event landscape. It would make things so interesting. And ultimately, again, I think this goes back to our earlier point about WWE's booking. I think it's going to be a screwy finish. I think Drew's going to interfere and attack Cody is what's going to happen. It's such a good opportunity to showcase a guy in Obafemi who is like, you want to talk about comparisons to Brock Lesnar? They have not had a prospect like this since Brock Lesnar. Oba's 26. He looks like a monster. He is one of the best in-ring performers they have right now. And I don't know if you saw his promo. Like, I saw it on social media after he won the title from Ricky Saints.
Yeah.
His promo he cut on Oba is better than like 90% of the promos on the main roster right now. Like, he nails the character, he nails the promo work, and he backs it up with incredible in-ring work. Like, he is the complete package. So, like, I'm very excited to see this match more than anything because Cody always shows out against these guys as well. Like, I think it's going to be a great match. It's just, I'm worried that we're going to have a screwy finish. And, I would rather see Oba lose clean than see a screwy finish here, is what I will say.
And I think you're onto something. We are going to see a screwy finish no matter what. But speaking of very high end feuds that we are very excited about, I'm going to change gears a little bit here because I want to jump to the Eddie Kingston Samoa Joe feud from AEW because that's one of my favorites right now. I've been a Eddie Kingston fan since day one. I think he's probably one of the truest promo guys that AEW has ever had.
Yeah.
And just his level of intensity is only matched by Samoa Joe.
Yeah. Straight up, these guys are perfect matches for each other because everything you said about Eddie, you can say about Joe. Like, Joe is one of the best promos in the game right now, too. He has been for his whole career, right? I saw a lot of hate for Eddie thrown out online because, he doesn't have the look of a star, right? I don't care. That's a guy that looks like he could beat your ass in a parking lot, if you ask me. Like, and he has the look.
Sorry. I think he's just so genuine, too. Like, we were talking about earlier about the misuse and use of characters. He's one of the guys that lives his character. Like you mentioned, he looks like a guy that could beat you up in a parking lot. When I hear him talk, I don't think of him as a wrestling character. I'm just like, that's who he is genuinely. He's a tough nose, just intense, but if you treat him well, good person.
I would, and this may be a crazy thing to say, especially because, like, his prime was 15 years before I was born, but is Eddie Kingston the modern day Dusty Rhodes in that he is the working class hero, is essentially his character?
I think we might be onto something here. And I think because obviously he's an older individual, just his long term organic growth and genuine nature go in to make him just one of the biggest like self-made stars. Because before even AEW, he was never in any of the big companies, right? He was never signed with WWE or New Japan, I don't believe. So long story short, I think just his long-term development and just how he was organically able to get over makes him that new age Rhodes, as you said.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just to go back to it again, like, his promos are just incredible. That promo he cut on Dynamite instantly sold me on this feud. I'm going to say it. I get they're building something with Samoa Joe, and I love Samoa Joe, and I love that they put the title on him. Frankly, Samoa Joe could hold that title for 3 years, and I wouldn't complain at all. But if there's ever a time to do a surprise title win, seeing Eddie Kingston holding the AEW World title would be an incredible moment. He doesn't have to hold it for long, but, that is the modern day Mick Foley beating The Rock for the WWE title. You know what I mean? Like, that is a moment that will just live rent free in everybody's head. maybe you run back that booking of that match too. Maybe Swerve comes out and screws Joe out of the title, and we get Eddie Kingston winning the title. Something like that. I think it would be so much fun to see, and something different. Nobody expects. They're building Joe up to be this big bad that is gonna, you know, the ops are going to be the next, Death Riders, the next stable running the company. Essentially, nobody's expecting them to lose the title right away. And so I think if you have this surprise win right away, Eddie Kingston stealing it from Samoa Joe, getting Eddie Kingston that moment, and it would be great, I think. And Joe can win the title back from him later, and then you make Samoa Joe a 3-time champion as well, which I also think
Yeah.
is you know is something special as well.
Yeah, and I think just even if Eddie Kingston does win, I think that becomes like the non-traditional full circle story moment, kind of like what Cody had when he came back and finally won the WWE Championship. This is a guy that's worked his butt off his entire life. And
Yeah.
is that finally his payoff moment type of deal, right? And as you said, he's a non-traditional wrestler. That would be a very good feel good moment for the fans, for him, for the promotion. And
Yeah.
speaking of non-traditional talent, how do you feel about that? All those Don Callis family members and just Don Callis's ability to get them over.
Well, the Don Callis family is my favorite faction in wrestling right now. Like, I've talked at length that Takesh is my favorite wrestler on the roster. Okada is an all-time legend, and Kyle Fletcher might be my favorite up-and-coming guy in wrestling right now. And that's not even talking about guys like Josh Alexander, Canadian legend, or Hechicero, who is just an outstanding talent, outstanding lucha libre talent that is getting very over working with these guys as well. And then there's like 20 other guys as well in there, right? It's hilarious how big this faction is, which I think just adds to Don Callis as a whole, who is just he is somehow such a hateable but hilarious manager. Like, everything he does is so goofy and funny, yet he still comes off as like just so hateable, so easy to boo, and just he's I want to say the modern day Paul Heyman, but Paul Heyman's still doing it in the modern day. But
Wow.
he's those two managers are one of one. If we ever saw the opportunity for an AEW WWE crossover, I just want to see more than anything else Don Callis versus Paul Heyman promo battle. That's what I would love to see, that more than anything.
Well, and that's one thing that I mentioned to you even before we started recording here. I feel like Don Callis is the AEW version of Paul Heyman, and Paul Heyman is the WWE version of Don Callis. Just because their ability to not only make these guys stars and turn this non-traditional talent into the top guys, but their
Yep.
ability to identify these guys a lot earlier.
Yeah, 100%. And it really owes to partially AEW's booking ability as well. But like I said, one of the top stories going AEW right now is Takeshita versus Okada. What they're building towards. These are two guys that can speak English all right, but certainly not to a high level. And they're building one of the most exciting feuds right now with barely any promo time. I think that's owed partially to Don Callis being able to get these guys over as their mouthpiece, but also just owed, like, Callis has been with Takeshita for a long time and is a huge part of why Takeshita's so over now. Like, Callis
Yeah.
has really helped build a lot of these guys up, I feel. And I think that's a big reason, alongside AEW's booking, as to why this feud that really shouldn't be working is working so well.
Well, and as we said earlier, it's just their ability to tell stories without having those verbal promo battles, right? They tell the story in the ring.
As it turns out, you don't need Triple H to stand in the ring for 40 minutes to tell you a story. You know?
No, exactly. And that's one thing that I can really appreciate AEW for is just their ability to tell those stories through the wrestling. Even in general, one of the things that AEW does very well is every match has a different feel, but every match succeeds because of that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just, and we've talked heavily on AEW right now, but WWE has been pretty good about this as well lately. But just, I think WWE's been telling a lot of good stories right now too. We alluded to
Yeah.
the women's tag titles earlier, and this is something that I actually have to give both companies credits for, because both the AEW tag team, women's tag team title tournament has been a bright spot on TV every week. They're showcasing a ton of women, getting a ton of women over, and in it's going to end with the Timeless Love Bombs winning. It has to, right?
Yeah.
That's the most over team in the company right now. Toni Storm is, probably the straight up best character worker in the business right now. Like, she is nailing what she's doing. And yeah, it's been a ton of fun. But, we alluded to WWE's women's tag title as well. everybody's going after it. In the fallout from War Games, they're all fighting for the titles, and it just makes those titles feel so special, and it's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing that WWE does very well too is they know how bloated their roster can be at times, but they still give you a reason to care about every single one of them,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So be it Nia Jackson, Lash Legend interrupting SmackDown, or Charlotte Flair Rhea Ripley match on Raw, like they work in everyone very well, and that's what adds to their entertainment factor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't know, Tyler. That's all I've got. I feel like I've talked about everything I want to talk about. What's one final thing you want to talk about here?
So two final things I want to talk about. I really like Joe Hendry. I'm
Oh man,
sad that they put him in NXT. I think he should have went straight to the main roster. I really enjoy it.
the only reason I'm happy he's still in NXT is I love the team up with Thea Hale because Thea Hale is just such a fun character. She's she's one of those ones that it almost breaks my heart in a way because the women's roster is so bloated right now that I just don't know if she's going to get the opportunity when eventually it comes time to move up to the main roster. But man, she just gets wrestling. She nails her character. She's a great in-ring talent, like great wrestler as well. But yeah, and again, like Joe Hendry is just outstanding in his role in everything he does. I would love to see him on the main roster, but I'm okay with him staying in NXT if this is where he's going to get the most screen time. You know what I mean? If he would move
That's
up to
fair.
Raw and would be choked out of screen time, not given a lot of opportunity, then that would kind of suck. So if this is where the best place for him, so be it.
The last thing I would want is another EC3 rerun where a completely over TNA champion comes over to WWE and gets put in 24/7 title feud, right?
At least Joe Hendry's a good person that we know of.
And speaking of good people too, the second thing I want to talk about, John Cena. Turns out he's opening Saturday night's main event. I feel
I
like that is not the best decision, but I want to hear your side.
I disagree. I love it because he has said going into this event, everything is not about him necessarily. It's supposed to be about the main in-ring talent, like all the up and comers. That's why they're building it as NXT versus WWE, right? They're getting his match out of the way. And another reason I like this too is because Saturday night's main event always has like a harsh cutoff. This prevents any issue of his match potentially going over and cutting off his chance to, give his farewell speech and everything, right? I
Yeah.
think that's important as well because remember that happened with Goldberg when he got retired by Gunther. The match kind of went long and Goldberg's speech got cut off because they're on a strict time limit. So they're avoiding that this way, and it ties into the fact that it's almost symbolic in a way. Cena's career is ending right at the beginning of the night, and now we're showing off what the future looks like. So I do like it.
For that reason, I do agree with you. I like it in like the idealistic way. However, I can't help but feel that a lot of WWE fans are just going to turn off Saturday night's main event after the Cena match,
That is true, and that is the
right?
one unfortunate thing. I hope he can sell them on, or I hope they can sell. And the one nice thing I think that will help is that they know the main event is still going to have Cody Rhodes, and I think that'll be enough of a draw to keep people around. They're going to watch Cena retire, and then, oh yeah, the WWE champion has a match tonight. Who's this NXT guy that he's getting to face? And then when they all see Oba, they're going to be like, oh my God, this guy is the next big thing. You know what I mean?
Well,
So I do think it can work out, but I do see where you're coming from there.
and that kind of goes back onto what we were talking about last week, where WWE hasn't done the best of job integrating NXT talent into the main roster because a lot of these NXT talents are working from the ground up as soon as they get called up, right?
Yeah.
Because the audience is unfamiliar with them. So with this, as I said, that's my one fear, and that's one reason why I don't like him going out first. Is I'm worried that it's gonna literally just get everyone to turn it off. I do logically, it does make sense because
Yeah.
I understand he wants to go backstage and hug everyone and thank everyone for everything they've ever done for him, and that gives him more time to do that as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah, I don't know. This is an event I'm really looking forward to. I don't know about you, but I like because I've been a big NXT fan for a long time. I like a lot of these guys, and it's going to be fun to see them finally getting their opportunity to compete against some main roster talent and to hopefully see some fans, get behind them real quick. Like I can't wait. Again, I can't sum this up enough. I cannot wait to see how fans that primarily just view main roster react to Oba
yeah,
Femi. who is the complete package.
Additionally, I don't know if I've ever been able to say this. I'm looking forward to the Bailey match. I'm looking forward to the Bailey Sol Ruca match.
Sol
Right.
Ruca's outstanding. Bailey's a great in-ring talent. I think it's gonna that match could steal the show. It really could.
So, with that being said, do you have any predictions as to any of the big matches either this week or next week?
For Saturday night's main event, the main one, I think Gunther taps out Cena. Straight up. I think that's what they're going to do. I think they go for it. And, maybe they're going to be scared to do it, but there's a reason Gunther alluded to it, I think. And so, I think that's what's going to happen. I think Cody is going to go over Oba, and I think he's going to win by disqualification because Drew's going to kick Cody in the head or something, and Cody's going to win by disqualification. I think that's what's going to happen.
I hate that I agree with you on this, but we both know that it's going to be one of those types of finishes, and I think that's why even on SmackDown we saw Cody literally attack Drew McIntyre in his own car.
Yeah.
Right.
And then for the Bailey Sol Ruca match, I think Sol Ruca wins clean off of a surprise Soul Snatcher because Bailey's one of those wrestlers that WWE views can take a clean loss. I don't know why they don't view all their main event talent as that. And it helps furthers Bailey's story as well, where she's like the multiple personalities and stuff. It's going to help frustrate her more, fracture her a little more if you want, and it can help build on that story. The Soul Snatch is one of the coolest looking finishers right now. And so when it's going to be a great moment for Sol Ruca to kind of break that out of nowhere and win a match where she's down and fighting an uphill battle and then breaks that move out to win it. I think it's going to be a great moment.
And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's all of our mic work for this week. So be sure to tune in next week so you don't
miss any spots.
Thanks so much. We'll talk at you next week.